before we get into it, stop right now. Go make yourself a snack because today I'm going to be ranking every single palette that I tried in the year 2023. And I have to admit, I skipped a couple months of my monthly rankings this year, so I thought we'd be significantly lower, especially since brands just weren't launching palettes as much. From what I've counted, and it could be incorrect because every year I mess up the count some way, which or how, we tried 86 palettes last year, which is less than last year because in 2022 we tried 107 eyeshadow palettes. So from 107 to 86, it is definitely lower and it felt a lot lower, which is great because I have more time to test some of these eyeshadows because of that. But it still is a lot more than I thought. So I've ranked them from worst to best. Now, for numbers 86 to 77, they are going to be featured in tomorrow's video. So the very worst palettes, the bottom 10 of 2023, will be posted tomorrow. So before we get into the rest, I want you to take the time right now to comment down below, what do you think some of my least favorite palettes were that are going to be featured in tomorrow's video are going to be. So we are going to start off with 76. And by the way, I feel like depending on the day that I film this, things can be switched around a little bit, but these are just really quick reviews of these palettes. So don't look too deep into it because it will stress me out. So number 76 is this palette from Ace Beauté. This is the Cala palette, which is unfortunate because I really love this color story, but I found this palette very difficult to work with, which is pretty rare for neutral palettes. So I think that that says a lot. The shimmers were fine, but the mattes I kept having to go in and blend and they would be patchy. So definitely quality is the reason for this ranking low. 75 is this one from Too Faced, which is interesting because I know a lot of people enjoyed this palette, but I struggled with this palette. So this is the Too Faced Italian Spritz. I just thought that some of the shimmers were quite chunky and the mattes were average. Normally for Too Faced, the palettes in these tins are pretty good, but I simply wasn't moved by this one. I think it was a great summer palette, but it's one that I kind of had to force myself to use, so that's why it's ranking here. 74 is this new palette from Oden's Eye. It's the Snow Dream palette. Something about the quality of this was just off. I mean, if I think about it as a whole, it's not a terrible palette, but it's definitely far from what quality I expect from Oden's Eye. The color story is nice. It does lack a lot of depth here. It's just not my favorite, and disappointment is a factor in these rankings, and this palette did disappoint me because I know Oden's Eye can do a lot better. 73. Okay, this one is not bad quality, but this is definitely all personal. I think it's kind of ugly. Not kind of. On me, it's horribly ugly. I just don't love these vivid blues on myself. Every time I put these on, I'm like a little scared when I look in the mirror. These tones do not flatter me at all. And like I said, the quality is good, but this just is not my favorite palette from Natasha Denona. I really don't like it. I really don't want to reach for it. So that is factored into why it is ranking where it's ranking. 72 is this one from Tarte, unfortunately. This is the Maneater Nightfall palette. This is just not good in my opinion. I find the shimmers to be way too chunky. Oops. And the mattes aren't really anything super special as well. That's not to say that you can't get, you know, a good look from this palette, but I just don't like it and the shimmers are too much of a mess, and I don't love this color story either. 71 is this one from Viseart, and it's not because of quality, because quality is great. This is the Rosea Lotus. It's just so boring. You know, Viseart can be boring, but this one I have so many palettes over that I can dupe this with, including other quads, and I think it's important that in the lineup of their palettes as a brand that each has its purpose. This one didn't. It just felt lazy to me. Very pretty, very good quality, so you might still enjoy this one, but it didn't do it for me, and these colors are just so overdone. 70 is this one from Too Faced. This is the Cosmic Crush palette. Some people didn't like this, I heard, but honestly, I really liked it. I don't think the quality is anything to write home about by any means, but I found it very easy to get a look with this. It's just like solid across the board quality. I wouldn't recommend paying full price for this. I felt like it was very easy to get looks with this just by the way that it was laid out, and I liked the colors of this, so I thought that this one was pretty good. 69 is this Monochromes Trio from Glossier in the shade Almond. It looks like a very pretty nude eyeshadow palette, and it is pretty on the eyes, but I feel like it pulled way too peachy for my liking. And these shadows, while they're fine, they're also nothing to write home about. I found myself not reaching for these palettes very often because they just weren't special enough, so this is just where it's fell. Nothing too terrible to say about it, really. 68 is this palette right here from Milani. Honestly, this is a decent option for matte shades from the drugstore, but as you know, I'm not in love with drugstore quality, really. So all things considered, this one's pretty good. I have no complaints about it, really, but it's just not as good as other matte palettes that I've dealt with, so I haven't reached for it as much. 77 is this one from Glossier Antique, and I saw a lot of reviews on this online, and I felt like it looked more gorgeous on everybody besides me. So maybe this is ranking lower because of my jealousy that it just didn't look as good as on me. But like I said, these Glossier quality are fine. I don't like the wasted space in the packaging. I don't have too much bad to say about this, other than I really didn't want to reach for it too often, and to me that speaks volumes. Alright, 66, we'll just go ahead and complete the family with the Glossier and Prairie. This one has a really cool olive undertone, so I definitely like it a lot more than the other ones color story wise. But the shimmers, and I'm just talking about all of them all together, they do fall more flat than I want them to. I want them to have more vavoom to them, so it just leaves me wanting more every time I use these palettes. 65, honestly, we're getting to the point where most of these palettes are pretty good and I like them, which I know sounds crazy because we're so early into the video, but there were not a lot of bad eyeshadow palettes that I tried this year. I kind of just had to rank them by like how much I used them and what color stories I liked, because from this point on, quality is pretty good. So we have this one from Urban Decay in Chill Happy. So this one, it's not the strongest purple palette, so that's why I ranked it a little bit lower, but I actually did get a good amount of use out of this, I'm not gonna lie. And these are just so cute, and I use them to travel. However, when I traveled, I did feel like I wanted a couple other shades to pair with these, so it did feel a little incomplete to me, this one in particular, but it is still very pretty, and I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. 64 is this one from e.l.f. Remember they did that collab with American Eagle, and I was shocked about the quality of this. I actually even thought that the blues were pretty good as well. It's kind of crazy. Now, this isn't knock my socks off quality, but it definitely is knock my socks off quality for e.l.f. This was a perfectly good palette. I just don't love the blues in this palette as much, but I do love the neutral tones. 63 is this one from Pat McGrath. This collection, I think it was the Love collection, it feels so far away to me. It feels like it's been longer than a year since this launched, but this one is the Mothership Sublime Seduction, which is just the warm tones, which for me, yawn, I haven't really wanted to reach for these tones too much. I honestly think the quality on this one is pretty good, but not one that I reach for a lot, and my least favorite of the color stories. 62 is this one from Pat McGrath from their holiday collection in Jeweled Temptation. Now, my sentiments about this one is the quality is fine if you can get it for a discount. I think it's worth the pickup. You're not going to have any issues with these, but these are not a good representation of the Pat McGrath formula that I favor. So the quality is fine, but honestly, this isn't even my favorite color story either. So it is more towards the bottom because there's no wow factor to it, in my opinion, but it's fine. 61 is yet another Pat McGrath palette from the Love collection. This is the Mothership Velvet Liaison, and all it is mattes, which is kind of boring, but I'll give Pat credit where credit is due. This is a very, very nice matte formula, but I didn't reach for this a lot, but these are super easy to blend, so I can't knock it for that. Overall, I will say though, the Love collection, quite forgettable from Pat McGrath. 60. Okay, so we have the NARS Endless Nights eyeshadow palette now. Not ranking this lower because of quality, because to be fair, the quality of this is really, really good. But it's that same Viseart sentiment where, don't I have this palette already? I find this palette to be extremely forgettable, which is a huge deal, you know? I don't want to forget about makeup. I think about makeup all day long, and I forgot about this one launching because it was so for me, because it has already been launched so many times from NARS, these exact same colors. However, if you are lacking these colors, this is good quality, so it's not a non-recommendation, but this is where it fell because it excited me not at all. 59. This one I'm ranking lower simply due to the fact that I just didn't feel the need to reach for it very often, and that is a huge factor in rankings. It's how often do I want to use these, because I play with makeup every single day for a job. I know some people wonder, how can I play with these when I have one face? Well, this is my job. I do multiple looks in one day. I swatch palettes at night. My day revolves around eyeshadow palettes, so I do spend a lot more time with these than you would suspect. So this is the Unbreakable Bond palette from Sydney Grace, and this is one that I'm not in love with the color story. Now, Sydney Grace creates some of the best quality, but this one was just a palette that didn't excite me, and that's not to say you can't get pretty looks. The quality is incredible, but they've launched some other palettes that you'll see in this video that I think are just more exciting to me. But if you do like the color story, it's very nice. 58 is this one right here from Joa. This is a very affordable palette. It's the Girls Night Out palette, and honestly, nothing about this palette screams amazing, but especially in the beginning of the year, I actually wore this a lot because the glimmer shades in here are incredible, and the mattes, while they're kind of dry, they work well, they blend well. So this one was a really surprising one to me for how many times I used it, because the glimmer shades were just so pretty on the eyelids. 57 is this one from Nomad. It's the Royal Europe palette, and Nomad really did an incredible job with their palettes this year. This one even has some shimmery multi-chromey shades here at the bottom. However, these colors I don't really like on myself, so I didn't really want to reach for it too often. The mattes are beautiful, buttery, pigmented, very easy to blend out, and the multi-chromes are quite cool as well, but I didn't really love this color story on myself. Moving on to 56. Now, this is a palette that was not loved by many, but I was one of the few that did. This is the Too Faced Pinker Times Ahead. I picked this up from HSN on a deal. They were trying to get rid of it. I think it's so pretty, these soft tones for the spring, and I thought the quality was very nice. I mean, nothing super amazing to write home about, but we know Too Faced doesn't really produce that quality. I didn't have any issues with the quality at all, and I thought the colors were very cute, and I loved that they squeezed all of these colors into a tiny palette. So this one worked out well for me. 55. This one's surprising because normally ABH palettes are amongst my favorite, but this is the Fall Romance palette, and it just didn't really do it for me. It definitely is a smoky eye palette, which I'm not as into smoky eye. Am I wearing a smoky eye? Would you consider this smoky? Somewhat. Anyways, this is a lot deeper than what I have on today, and I feel like the quality of this, it was drier than what I'm used to. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a fine palette. The quality is fine, the color story is fine, but I can't help the little bit of disappointment. I feel that this is not the usual ABH super buttery, creamy formulation, and the color story, I just wasn't drawn to it really, even for the fall where these tones are the most appropriate. 54 is another good one from Urban Decay. So this is a smiley palette. So I was using this more than the Chill palette, which was the purpley one. This one worked a little better for me on vacation. I thought it was a really fun palette to bring for holiday, and it was very true. I enjoyed it a lot. However, again, I do feel like something is missing, like something deeper. I always wanted a darker brown palette with this. So even though I really liked the quality, the portability, how small it was of this, it was missing something, but it's still very nice. 53 is this one from Nomad. This is the Verona palette, and this one I loved the packaging of. I love what they did. Here, I love this side. Now, the side next to it, I wasn't really reaching for. It's just not within my comfort zone, but I had a lot of fun with this side of the palette, and again, I really do feel like Nomad has improved on their quality. This was such a fun concept of a palette, really nice, and it's crazy that it's ranking in the 50s here because it's so good. I don't know. All of these coming forward, I've really enjoyed. 52 is this one from Viseart here. This is the Fleurette Bisou. I have to say I'm very happy with the quality of the Viseart palettes. So this one I like because they do have blushes and eyeshadows, but this is my least favorite color story of the ones that they launched. Just really warm and uninspiring to me, but again, the looks you get with this are gorgeous, and I do love that portability with the fact that these now do have blushes. So a really nice palette, but uninspiring at the same time. 51 is an indie brand love. This is from Fantasy Cosmetica. This is the Warlock palette, and this one I've had a lot of fun with as well, creating looks, and Fantasy Cosmetica is another one of those brands that has just really stepped up their formula. Now, is this color story within my comfort zone? No. So did that debilitate me in using it? Absolutely, because I'm just not reaching for this color story as much. While it's super fun and unique, I didn't reach for it a ton, just a handful of times. So do keep that in mind. But the formula is incredible, and if you like this color story and you want to support an indie brand, I do recommend this one. 50 is this one from Pat McGrath. A launch that is harder to remember, but I did really like this Luxe eyeshadow quad in Passion Fleur because it's pinky and purple, and I just think it's gorgeous, and it's a very easy one to reach for and definitely very good quality. So while this one is still kind of forgettable and not as great, I do think the quality on this is really nice, and I've really loved my makeup when I've created looks with this. 49 is this one from Odin's Eye, and this is the Little Ghost palette, and this one has such fun colors. This really is true to Angie's aesthetic. The quality on this is amazing as per usual, and the looks you can get are incredible with it, but this year I just have not been into bold makeup. That's definitely a me thing. You can see I have the lighter eye on. I've been doing more simple looks like this, so this one didn't get the love that it deserved. 48 is this one from Natasha Denona. It's the Mini Starlit palette, which is definitely more up my alley for the kind of looks that I was creating this year. Just these lighter, brighter, softer looks like the one I have today. So this one is perfect. Now, it definitely lacks depth. So if you have a little bit of color on you, I would rank this a lot lower in my rankings because it's definitely not for every skin tone, but on myself, I loved it, and I did find it pretty easy to reach for. 47 is the other big holiday palette from Pat McGrath. This is the Bijou Brilliance Starstruck Splendor palette. Now this one, I liked the color story a lot of more, so it's the same thing where the quality on this isn't the best representation of what I think you can get from Pat McGrath palettes, but that doesn't mean I don't like it. The quality of this is still really nice, really workable. I love these pops of greens. I really like the blushes that they chose to put in here. So this one, because I just am more inclined to reach for these colors, it is a much more enjoyable experience. So I like this one a lot more. Working our way down, we're at 46 now. This one's gonna shock you guys, but honestly, I didn't love it. This is the Xenon palette. It just wasn't a perfect palette for me, which Natasha Denona normally does a perfect palette. I felt like a lot of the matte shades here were redundant. The shimmers were really pretty, but this also is very, very grayscale, which is not something that I'm reaching for on the daily. So it's not a palette that is getting a ton of use, which normally it's the opposite for Natasha Denona palettes. But that being said, it is still a Natasha Denona palette, and despite its flaws, it still is an amazing quality palette. But this is just where it fell because I wasn't in love with this launch. It just wasn't for me. 45 is this palette from Odin's Eye. It's the Trick or Treat palette. This one, you know what, surprisingly, normally I don't go for the warmer palette that gets launched, but this one I've enjoyed the looks that I've created with it, and of course, it's that great Odin's Eye quality, especially with the shimmers here, so surprisingly I had a lot more fun with this palette than I thought I was going to. It's very vivid, which is out of my comfort zone, but this one did have a little bit more tones here that are within my comfort zone, so I enjoyed my time with this one. 44 is the last from the Love collection, and even though I said that this collection was forgettable, I have to admit this was an easy palette to reach for and gorgeous on the eyes. This is Iconic Infatuation. It's that pretty rosy mauve palette, which I'm normally not partial to from Pat McGrath at this point, but these had a coolness to them that I really enjoyed. That is a color story that I've been very into during 2023. And again, the quality of this is really nice, so I've enjoyed this one a lot, not gonna lie. 43 is this one from Esam. It's their Artistry palette number 1 Balance, which is an all matte eyeshadow palette. Now, this has the best array of matte colors if you are a makeup artist. All of these neutral tones. You also have warm tones, cool tones, plummy tones. What a dream this palette is. It's fantastic for makeup artists because you can just open it like this, but it's great for everybody, and this is very nice quality. Is it as good as my Viseart quality? Nope, and I did keep that in mind with my rankings, but it's a solid matte palette. 42 is from Gourmand Girls. This is the Spooked palette. This is such a fun one. on. I wore this to a couple of events where I can get away with more bright makeup. I just feel more comfortable with it. And I feel like this palette is surprisingly cohesive. When I looked at it, I wasn't too sure, but then I started applying these to the eyes and I really enjoyed it. Some of the shimmers are chunky, so be careful with that. This is a messy palette. Do not do your face makeup first, but I don't know, I have good memories with this palette now because of the events that I wore it to. It's a gorgeous palette. It's fun, it's unique, it's different than what you're going to find on the mainstream market, which is very important. 41, one of the most beautiful palettes. It's been a great everyday palette for me. This is from the brand Florasis. So this one, of course, has the beautiful artistry on the front, and then also the most beautiful embossments, which makes it very difficult to want to use. The only thing I have to critique is that I do wish the mattes had a little bit more pigment, but really other than that, the shimmers here are so pretty. This gives like the prettiest eye-awakening look, and it's very simple and thoughtless. So this has been a palette that I've not been using on camera very much or talking about very much, but whenever it's near me, I will reach for it for just a quick everyday light makeup look, and of course, it's just gorgeous to stare at. 40. So Oden's Eye, they launch a lot of palettes a year, it feels like. This is the Planet Spirit palette. This palette is a little bit more on the neon side, which is not my cup of tea. I feel like this one was done very tastefully, and not only that, because there's less colors, this is a little bit less intimidating for me, so I do feel more inclined to reach for it because it's not so many bright colors all in one palette. It's a dose of 10, and that's enough to where I feel like it's easy for me to come up with something quick and bold if that's the way I want to go. So that's where this is ranking, and it's great quality. 39. This is from, like, I swear I tried this January 1st this year. This is from the Pat McGrath Star Wars collection. This is Divine Droid. Ranking this pretty high simply because Pat McGrath never does these colors. So this one was fun. I've gotten some fun looks. The quality doesn't knock my socks off at this point. It's kind of similar to the Haus Labs, but I think a little bit better if you ask me. More up my alley. But yeah, this is a way to try color from Pat McGrath, and I loved this color story. 38 is the Sea Talk palette from Oden's Eye. This one, I love this corner over here of neutrals, but then you also have the fun pops. This one is a really fun summer palette. That's when I reach for this one more. My use of it, my thoughts about it have slowed down since, but no, I think I'm gonna have to pull this again next summer because the quality is super nice. 37, this is the Charlotte Tilbury Beautyverse palette. Lots of people didn't like this one. I didn't find it worth the money, and while I will say definitely not worth the money, I think it's a very nice palette. It's a really easy glitter look that this gives you. You know, the mattes that she gives you here are kind of basic, and the shimmers are super, they're not basic. I think they're very pretty, and you use your finger to apply them. This is a very intuitive, easy to use palette for beginners in makeup. It is very pricey, so you can decide if something like this would be worth it or not, but I liked this palette. 36 is this one from Pat McGrath's holiday collection. This is the Sunset Romance, and this formula, I feel like it's not as good as last year's, but it still is a nice, easy to use formula. I still just love the finish of this on the eyes. This color story wise is why it's ranking lower. It's still gorgeous to wear and all of that good stuff. But yeah, that's where it fell. A lot of these palettes, you know, you test so much, they gotta go somewhere. That's where this one went. 35. I have this one from Nomad. This is the Ghost Town palette. This one is so stinking beautiful. If you love cool tones, I think you are going to love this one. This one is unique. It has a little bit of depth in here. It has gray tones, blue tones, brown tones, taupe tones. Ugh, I don't think a brand has ever had the balls to come out with a color story like this. Amazing. 34 is this one from Glaminatrix. This is an Into the Night palette. Again, another event palette. I tend to go for indie brand palettes when I go to events because it's really my time to get creative and have fun. This one, well, initially it's not really something that I would go for very often. Oh, it's fun for events that I want to look dressed up for or want to do different looks with and pretty easy to blend with the mattes. The mattes aren't like my #1 favorite formula, but the shimmers, they're so good, so pretty. I'm just thinking about this shade right here. I wore it to an event all over my eyelid. It was incredible. 33 is this quad from YSL. Now, I've recently been in a love affair with these YSL quads. So this one is number 200 and it's by far my least favorite. Nothing to do with the quality either, just a blah color story to me, something I really don't feel the need to reach for very often. But I personally really love these palettes. I love the quality. They are the true epitome of luxury eyeshadow quality where they're effortless to apply and they look effortless and elegant on the eyelid. 32 is the Groundwork Defining Neutral palette from Danessa Myricks. A very unique neutral palette where the bigger pan is a pomade, the smaller pan is a powder. My critique of this is I wish they were switched. I'm a powder girl. I prefer to use powders. I'm more comfortable with powders. And I feel like some of these take just a little bit too much to build up the pigment. However, Danessa Myricks is a genius. She knew what she was doing here. This is an extremely versatile palette, and despite it being just these boring neutral tones, these are so flattering for the face. You can use them in so many different ways. So this is such a neat palette. 31 is this one from Isom. This is their Artistry palette in number 4, Elevate, and it is just an all shimmer palettes, but I love the formula of Isom shimmers. They are so high quality. You have iridescent shades here, you have just true metallics, and then these deeper jewel tones down here. The way that this is laid out is very intuitive. And all things considered, for this being a colorful palette, it's actually quite approachable. If you are uncomfortable with color but want to elevate your makeup a little bit with just a hint of more color, this is definitely something I'd recommend utilizing in your collection because these aren't intimidating, but you have all of these different finishes, and of course you're getting amazing quality from Isom. 30 is this mini from Pat McGrath. This is the mini eyeshadow palette in Sublime Smoke. This is the perfect tiny travel palette, okay? There was a couple of trips I took this year where I didn't want to take up much space in my suitcase. I packed this because it has everything you need. Lid color, transition color, outer corner color, eyeliner, the whole shebang in literally the tiniest eyeshadow palette. So useful and great quality. Just the perfect travel palette, if you ask me, for the most limited amount of space. 29 is the Heaven on Earth palette from Sydney Grace. Again, Sydney Grace is one of the highest quality eyeshadows that you can purchase. This one has really fun earthy tones here. So you have brown tones, green tones, and these blue tones as well. These colors are right up my alley, and once again, the quality is just incredible. This looks so lightly used, but I've used this a handful of times. Anyways, the most perfect colors. You don't need to jump into another palette. I love how they laid this one out. Everything about this. 28 is from Too Faced. I love this palette. This is their Holiday Maple Syrup Pancakes. I love the quality of this, and I, in particular, love the color story of this. I've loved the looks that I've gotten from it, whether it be neutral to purple to smoky. I've had so much fun with this palette, surprisingly, because I know this one had some haters, but for some reason I find myself really attached to this palette. It was such a good pickup this year for me. 27 is this one from Nomad. This is, I think, my favorite palette from them this year. This is the Safari palette, and it honestly was very close to the Yucca palette from Natasha Denona, just slightly different formulas and colors. This one, believe it or not, was more vivid. I don't know, they just did such a good job with this palette. I'm telling you, Nomad has created some kick-butt color stories this year. This one was right up my alley for a phase I was going through with these greenish tones, so I had a lot of fun with this one. We are getting to the best of the best. Let's do 26. This is the Shu Uemura Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon palette. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the packaging of this chunk packaging is such a turnoff. However, the quality in here is so luxury. The first half of the year, I was using this palette all of the time because the shimmers in here are incredible. The mattes are so buttery smooth. It's a palette that looks so cheap, but the quality is randomly amazing. 25 is the Huda Beauty Matte palette in Warm Matte Obsessions. These matte palettes from Huda are incredible. They're so smooth and blendable. They do the work for you. Now, warm tones are what I'm not reaching for as much, or what I'm less inclined to reach for. I still do a lot of warm looks, but the quality on this, I do like a shimmer though, so I'm always reaching for other palettes to top off the look, but these are so good. And you'll see, because there's another one coming up. 24 is this Esom Artistry palette number 2 Intensity. So this again is an all shimmer palette. And like I said, the shimmers from Esom they're so stinking good. So again, you have like more satin shades, metallic shades, and deeper shades here, just on the more neutral tone, which you guys know I'm a neutral lover, so I'm reaching for these more. But yeah, phenomenal shimmers. 23 is this quad from Pat McGrath. When did she come out with all of these? I know that I love these, but I feel like they came out a long time ago. Anyways, this is the Divine Bronze Luxe Quad in Venusian Sunrise. And this for me is classic Pat McGrath formulation-wise. She's done this palette before, but I love the look that this creates, and you don't have to think about it. So this is one that's been up my alley, because if I want a Pat McGrath look, the Pat McGrath glimmer on the lid, but I want it to be neutral, this has been one that's been very, very easy to grab for off-camera kind of situation. So I actually got a decent amount of use out of this one this year, so that's why it's more towards the top here. 21 is this YSL quad. This is 300, so this one is like more of a golden neutral palette. Again, phenomenal quality. I really love how buttery these blend and the pretty shimmer on the eyelids. So yeah, I mean, this is just where I felt. 20 is the Danessa Myricks Lightwork I Am palette. So this is her yearly collection of her crazy, shifty, multi-chrome shades. This year's I very much enjoyed. I wasn't a fan of last year's, but this year I love the range of different shifty shades that they have. And I've changed my tune about these because this one definitely gives me sticker shock. But you know, if you are familiar with the price of indie shifty shades, this is actually a good value to kind of get all in one here. If you collect indie shadows, you probably don't need this palette. However, if you want to start off with those collections of the shifty shades, this honestly is a great place to start, because one of these shadows can run you $15 to $20+ if you were to buy them individually, which makes this one really special. And this is a great way to dip your toes in with all the different formulas that you get in here. I'm not reaching for these a lot, but these are fun to like take one and pop on the lid, you know? 19 is the Viseart Fleurette Amour palette. I love the color story of this. If it's purple, I want it. And again, you have the matching blushes here to go with the eyeshadows, and it's the amazing Viseart quality. So just a little taste of Viseart in this palette here is perfect, because you get that good quality, and I love the colors in this one. 18, this one makes my heart sing. So the top 20 is like really killing it here. This is the ABH Cosmos palette, and this is the prettiest kind of, I'm gonna say 2 and done eyeshadow palette. Just pop one of the mattes on the eyes and then pop one of the shimmers all over the eyelid, and you have the most pretty, effortless, fairy-like look. The only thing I would have changed about this palette were the colors of the mattes. I feel like we could have had a lot more fun with the matte colors in the palette, but other than that, the quality on these shimmers is so buttery. Same thing with the mattes. While this isn't a palette that I'm going to use multiple shades to create looks with, it's not very good for complex looks. It is good for just picking a crease color, maybe even an outer corner color, and then using one of the shimmers all over, and it's so quick and easy. And pretty, if you like that fairy look. Number 17, this is from Viseart. It's the Coyish Etendu, and I feel like this is one of the most wearable, colorful palettes ever, because these are like watercolor vibrant shades. They apply like watercolor, but you don't feel like you need more pigment. It's actually a non-overwhelming, colorful palette, and it's very, very easy to use. I was really, really impressed with this. They're like vibrant pastels or watercolor vibrant shades. It's kind of an in-between there, and then of course you get the great Viseart quality, and you'd be surprised how versatile this palette is with the looks that you can create. I've enjoyed my time with this. As somebody who loves neutral looks, I've had so much fun with this. Number 16 is a palette from Odin's Eye. This is the Flora Story palette, and I said this when it came out, but this is me in a color story. Like, these hues are incredible. Purpley tones, greenish tones, but still really wearable. I love this color story so much, and I've had so much fun with this palette. And again, it's that gray Odin's Eye quality, so kind of obsessed with this one. Wait, we're already at 15 how? Well, at 15, I have this one from Pat McGrath. It's the Lunar Nightshade palette from the holiday collection. How beautiful is this color story? Now, you guys know I do have my biases about Pat McGrath, though I do think her brand has changed and is not as great. I really love this new formula from Pat McGrath. I think it's so stunning and elegant on the eyes. And this one is a more adventurous color story for Pat McGrath of late. So I've had a lot of fun with this, and even though it is not super adventurous, but it's still adventurous, it's quite within my comfort zone as well. This is a color story that I love. So gorgeous. And then 14 is Bronze Ecstasy. So this one is more, it's smoky, but it's more purpley. This one I've fallen in love with every look that I've done. Now, I will say the quality on these aren't perfect. Some of them you kind of have to press down a little bit hard to get them on the eyelid, but I just love the way that these look on the eyelid so much. I've been reaching for these a lot in my everyday life because of how pretty they look. So that's why this fell here. Love this color story. 13 is this one from Viseart. This is the new one that just launched, Kashmiri Charmeuse. Viseart killed it with these palettes. I love the Etendu palettes because of how many colors that you get. And this one is almost like chocolate, is it not? Now, it's not necessarily unique from Viseart, but I don't care in this case because I love this color story so much. And I feel like that they've stepped up at their shimmer games this year as well. And the mattes, they blend like butter. Just a great representation of Viseart quality. If you are feeling this color story, I think you will like it. And a lot of times with palettes like these, I feel like the colors are a little bit too similar to one another. I really don't feel that way with this one. I feel like they all look different. Not all of them, but most of them. So good. Number 12, I have this one that I've been wearing a ton. It's my new favorite nude palette. It's from Clio. It's called the Napping Cheese palette. I love it, and it's just the most perfect nude tones. Now, if you do have more melanin to your skin, it's probably not going to show up that well on you. I would say these nude tones are more suited to somebody with my complexion, but if you do have my complexion, this is really beautiful light shades, and the glimmery shades here are gorgeous. I've been reaching for this palette a ton lately. I can't seem to put it down. Number 11 is the last of the Pat McGrath holiday palettes. This is Boudoir Bliss. This created one of my favorite go-to looks for the year. It looks so chic, so effortless, and it's from this palette, and it's a rosy palette, which I say I'm so sick of rose from Pat McGrath, but in this case, it works, and I have to eat my own words because even though I'm tired of pinks, I wear them a lot. So I get why they keep coming out with it because I keep wearing them. But I feel like I have enough. I will wear the ones I have all the time. Give me something different. But anyways, it's that same formula. And one of my favorite looks of all time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to break this to you, but I'm going to leave you hanging for the top 10. And you're going to have to subscribe to my channel and like this video because I am going to be coming out with my top 10 eyeshadow palettes of 2023 in a separate video. So if weird things don't happen, tomorrow my worst of 2023, the bottom 10, will come up, and then the day after that should be the top 10 palettes. So take a moment, make another comment down below. What palettes do you think are going to be in the top 10? What did I not mention? What do you know that I love that I didn't talk about? Leave your predictions down below and make sure you come back tomorrow and check on your answers and let me know in that comment section how you did. So we ranked a lot of palettes today and we're not even done yet. I'll see you tomorrow in the next one. Bye guys, have a good one.